Josef Alois Ratzinger was born on the 16th of April 1927 at this house at 11 Schulstrasse at Marktl and Inn. Marktl is on the Inn River. About 5 kilometres southeast, the Inn meets with the Salzach River, which flows northeast until it reaches Passau, where it joins the Danube. From the confluence of the Salzach and Inn rivers, the river is the border between Germany and Austria. From the house of his birth, the house where a famous Austrian Catholic was born 37 years and 361 days earlier, is a distance of less than 6 kilometres. It is the relationship between these two that I'm going to discuss in this video. At the time of becoming Pope in 2005, there were a lot of jokes, some of them quite spiteful, about what he did during the Nazi regime. Here is the headline from The Sun, for example. And here's one of mine. This is the first Pope to have been a member of the Hitler Youth. I wonder if they'll now make it compulsory. However, there are also some pieces of humour from Germany as well. Wrote Bild columnist Franz Josef Wagner in an open letter to tabloids in the UK, anyone reading your British popular newspapers must have thought that Hitler had been made Pope. So, how much choice did the young man have? Did he really have to join the Hitler Youth? His father was Josef Ratzinger Sr., a gendarme born on the 6th of March 1877. The gendarmerie was abolished by the National Socialist regime in 1936, but this would not have affected Josef Sr. very much, as he retired aged 60 in 1937. He died on the 25th of August 1959. His mother, Maria, was born on the 8th of January 1884, and she was a cook. He had 2 older siblings, Maria, born on the 7th of December 1921, and Georg, born on the 15th of July 1924. His great-uncle was also called Georg, and in the 19th century he had been a Reichstag deputy. As the father was posted to different locations, the family moved several times. In July 1929 they moved to Tittmoning, a town near Traunstein, and to Passau am Inn in December 1932. Following the retirement of Josef Sr., the family settled in Hufschlag near Traunstein in April 1937. I have heard the claim that Josef Ratzinger Sr. was moved because of his opposition to Nazism. However, this is not borne out by the transfers, which happened before the Nazi seizure of power, and in any case were geographically very close to each other. In March 1922, a youth wing of the National Socialist German Workers' Party was formed. In July 1926, this became the Hitler Youth. At the time of the seizure of power in January 1933, there were around 108,000 members. That is really a lot for the youth wing of a political party. Baldur von Schirach, who had been appointed by Hitler on the 17th of June 1933 as youth leader of the German Reich, introduced a weekly National Youth Day. This was held on Saturdays, and youngsters who were in the Nazi youth organizations were exempted from schooling in order to do their bit for the Führer. This had the additional side effect of putting peer pressure on non-members to join up. And after all, let's face it, running around the country sounds much more exciting than school lessons. On the 1st December 1936, the law on the Hitler Youth was enacted, which made it, alongside family and school, the only educational institutions for all young people in Germany over the age of 10. There were separate organizations for boys and girls. On the 20th of April, after their 10th birthday, Boys joined the Deutsches Jungvolk, and at 14 they went into the Hitler Youth. As there was nowhere else to go, the Hitler Youth grew to 7 million people by 1939. Compulsory youth service was introduced on the 25th of March 1939. 10-year-olds were obliged to join, and their guardians were legally responsible for their attendance. Even people who were half Jewish or half Gypsy had to attend. This requirement, however, was dropped in 1941. Activities in the Hitler Youth were mainly very similar to what one would expect in the Scouts or similar organisations. There was a lot of sport, walks in the countryside, singing, camping. The object was to bond the youth together. 90% of the songs in the Hitler Youth songbook came from the pre-National Socialist youth organisations. However, there was also political indoctrination, and those which were the most indoctrinated ended up in units like the Waffen-SS division Hitlerjugend, which fought desperately against overwhelming odds in Normandy in the summer of 1944. On the 4th of March 1939, Josef Ratzinger Sr. sent a letter to the Traunstein Seminary requesting his son, then aged 11, be admitted. This was an institution for boys who wanted to become priests, particularly those from poor backgrounds. This application was supported by a letter from Hubert Pöhlein, a teacher at the Traunstein High School, which praised the boy as good, hard-working and reliable. There was also a letter from Dr. Paul Keller stating that although underweight, the boy was in good health. The boy passed the entrance exam with flying colours, and on the 16th of April 1939, Josef Ratzinger Jr., later Pope Benedict XVI, entered the St. Michael Seminary in Traunstein. There were up to 170 seminarians there. Their families worked mostly in agriculture, but some were workers and some small business people. In 1938 to 1939, only 11 students paid the full fees, which included board and lodgings. Contact with children from outside was discouraged. The day was precisely divided up: Mass every day, confession once a week, and lessons in between. At the beginning of the 1939 to 1940 school year, 2/3 of the pupils at the Traunstein High School were not members of the Hitler Youth. From 1938, the parents of pupils who were not members of the National Socialist youth organisations no longer had the right to discounted school fees. They had to pay the full amount. For someone like the retired gendarme Josef Ratzinger Sr., who received a pension of 242 Reichsmarks and had 5 mouths to feed, this would have made a big difference. To put this into context, that was roughly equivalent of $90 or £19 a month. This was more than the average wage in Germany in 1939 of 175 marks. However, school fees at the seminarium were 550 Reichsmarks a year, the cost of which, in the case of Josef Ratzinger, was covered by the church. The seminarians were not officially forbidden from membership in the Hitler Youth. However, at Traunstein in 1939, there was not a single seminarian who was in it. When, on the 25th of March 1939, all 10 to 14-year-olds had to join the Deutscher Jungvolk, and all 14 to 18-year-old boys had to join the Hitler Youth, the seminary initially resisted. It took them until October 1939 to register all seminarians over the age of 14, and even at this late date, they still did not register the younger boys. Life in the seminary changed as a result of compulsory membership in the Hitler Youth. Training courses, exercises and parades were deliberately placed at prayer and service times, or so thought the seminary. As the war progressed, the National Socialist authorities needed the seminary buildings, and in 1941 they were requisitioned for use as a Wehrmacht military hospital. The young Ratzinger was sent back to his earlier school. Josef Ratzinger, the future Pope, joined the Hitler Youth on his 14th birthday on the 16th of April 1941, although, as we have seen, he had got out of it for 2 years thanks to the seminary. Membership of the Hitler Youth gave discounted rate on school fees, but Ratzinger claimed that he did not want to go to the Hitler Youth. In his book Salt of the Earth, Ratzinger says the following: "Thank goodness there was a very understanding mathematics teacher. He himself was a Nazi, but he was also an honest man, and he said to me, 'Just go once and get the document so that we have it.' When he saw that I didn't want to go, he just said, 'I understand, I'll take care of it,' and so I didn't have to go. Therefore, he was theoretically a member because he went to one meeting, and thus his family got the Hitler Youth discount on his schooling, which of course would have been very welcome." However, this opinion of Ratzinger's good intentions were not shared by Elisabeth Lohner, who knew the family in pre-war days and who was 84 when he was elected Pope in 2005. Her own brother-in-law was sent to Dachau as a conscientious objector. She said it was possible to resist, and those people who resisted set an example for others. The Ratzingers were young and made a different choice. At a conference in the Vatican on the 28th of November 1996, the then Cardinal Ratzinger said that he had a cousin with Down syndrome who in 1941 was 14 years old. This cousin was taken away in part of the T4 euthanasia program, possibly to Hier Grafeneck, where the cousin was murdered. At the time, the family was informed that the child was receiving therapy, and later there would have been a message, something along the lines of this: "Despite all the best possible care, the child died." Of course, it needs to be pointed out that the family may not have been aware that the child had been murdered, probably in the gas chamber. On the 2nd of August 1943, at the age of 16, he was sent from Traunstein to Munich to an anti-aircraft factory in Unterföhring. Then he was sent to protect the BMW factory in Alfag in Ludwigsfeld in the northern part of Munich. Later his battery was transferred to Glichen, where the future Pope worked at the telephone exchange, surviving a bombing attack. He was sent home on the 10th of September 1944. Another obligation for all Germans was in the Reich Labour Service, which he performed in Burgenland in Austria, where he was employed amongst other things in the construction of the defences. He was released from this service on the 20th of November 1944. On the 13th of December 1944, he was conscripted into the Wehrmacht. He did his basic training in the Traunstein infantry barracks. In April 1945, he went absent without leave and he returned to his parents' home in Hufschlag. The young Joseph walked out of Traunstein, passing through a control point with some difficulty. This could have entailed the death sentence, and going back to his parents' home was not a wise move. 2 SS men were even billeted with the Ratzinger family. They asked why the young man of military age was there. The story is that the older Josef Ratzinger told them what he thought of Hitler, and the next day they were gone. The fact that he got away with it just shows how much discipline and order had broken down at the very end of World War II. Cardinal Ratzinger wrote in his memoirs, "A special angel seemed to be guarding us." He was later taken prisoner by the Americans and held in POW Camp 314 in Neu-Ulm. On the 19th of June 1945, he was released. Then he started to walk the 120 kilometres home, but was fortunate enough to get a lift from a milk truck in Traunstein. And after this, he returned to school. In conclusion, whereas the Catholic Church during the Nazi period was guilty of many crimes and individual Catholics from Hitler on down were responsible for the bulk of these crimes, the future Pope was only 18 when the war ended and cannot be blamed for them. He did join the Hitler Youth, not because he believed in Nazism, but because it gave his family a reduction in his school fees, which no doubt was very welcome to them, given that they were living off the father's pension in wartime. He could have got out of it at aged 14, but who here would have as much courage as the brother-in-law of Elisabeth Lohner? I can think of a lot of things to criticise him for, but being a member of the Hitler Youth is not one of them. I hope you found that interesting. My historical specialisation is in the period of the Third Reich, in particular the Holocaust, and if you're interested in that type of thing, then you might want to subscribe. So for the moment, all the best from me, and you may hear me in another video.